What's going on, guys? It's Zach here, bringing you guys another fantasy football video, and this one was something a little bit different. I thought I'd give you guys a bit of a peek behind the curtain and give you guys just a look at two of the teams I drafted this year. These are the two teams that I spent the most money on buy-ins in, a little bit of a ridiculous amount, so don't judge me a little bit, but this first team you'll look at, that was about a $2,000 buy-in, and the second one was a $1,000 buy-in, so that's the high end of what I spend here. That's generally, I'll call that my gambling budget for the year. But I certainly do think I like to put my money where my mouth is, and it's certainly, I think, something that you guys will enjoy, just seeing, how I am really, acting on the decisions that I'm telling you guys to make. It's just sort of fun exercise. You guys can see the teams I make. I'll try and provide some updates, of course, the season, so you guys can keep track of how I'm doing as well. And hopefully you guys find these enjoyable. I'd love to hear what you guys think about my teams. Tell me if you guys think I did anything wrong. For both these teams I will show you, they will be a 10-team half PPR format. 4-point quarterback passing touchdown. A pretty standard league format here. We've got 2 running backs, 2 receivers, and 2 flex spots. So in general, pretty standard, both league types. They're both the same structure. There are a couple of leagues I've been in for a while. I do these every year. I have won it before, so I have at least profited so far on doing this. But hopefully you guys find this useful, and hopefully you guys enjoy seeing just what sort of teams I'm putting together here. So for the first team here, this is the team that I did spend a $2,000 bill on a buy-in here. Started things off, as you can see, I generally went towards a zero RB approach here. This was an auction draft, so I tried really hard to target value as it came to me. Ended up getting really good values on guys like A.J. Brown and Mike Evans, but that obviously put me at a pretty decent hole in terms of how much money I had left to spend. But that being said, I still ended up with Jalen Hurts at quarterback here. Guy that I think is in line for at least another top 3 finish. I'm super stoked about him, and then stacking him with A.J. Brown was a bit of a priority of mine after I ended up with A.J. Brown. At running back, I do think it is fair to say that's going to be the weak spot of the roster here. I've got Alvin Kamara and Tony Pollard. I did sort of hedge my bets a little bit, going with guys like Zeke, Devin Singletary, and Khalil Herbert, just trying to find some guaranteed volume here. In a 10-team league this small, it's a little bit of a smaller league, I'm pretty confident I'll be able to really prioritize the running back position on waivers early on in the season, and in half PPR, I think Alvin Kamara is in line for an absolutely monster season, and then Tony Pollard's a guy that I think is actually pretty underrated right now. I'm pretty comfortable starting him in week 1, and I do think it is going to work out pretty well for me, and of course, if it doesn't, I've got some guaranteed touches in guys like Zeke and Singletary, and I do believe I'll be able to find some more upside over the course of the season. At receiver, beyond A.J. Brown, I managed to get Mike Evans, like I mentioned earlier, to go with Marvin Harrison and DK Metcalf here. So that is arguably going to be the best wide receiver room in this league here. I've got 4 guys that I view to be absolute studs this season. They're guys that I'm super stoked about. And I was able to get Trey McBride as well, a guy that I do believe is going to be the tight end 1 this season. That's super exciting for me. I did, however, you can note here that I did end up with Trey McBride and Marvin Harrison. Not exactly optimal. I'd be willing to move one of those guys, even though I'm super high on both of them. But that being said, I'm still super stoked about this roster, and I think that it's got all the pieces there. And then at receiver, even on my bench, I've got 3 really high upside guys in Christian Watson, Rome Odunze, and Jameson Williams. Those are guys, the kind of draft picks I'm looking to make on my bench, guys that I really do think offer enough upside that you could potentially see yourself starting them in a roster, even where you did maybe prioritize the wide receiver position. And I think that in general, this roster is in line for a lot of success here, even though I am probably going to need to prioritize addressing the running back position at some point over the course of the season, maybe moving one of the Cardinals if I wanted to. But overall, this is a team that I'm really stoked about. I think it's in line for a big year, and hopefully you guys agree. Like I said, if you guys have any comments on this one, any questions as well, happy to let you guys take a look at it. I do think this is slightly worse than the team I drafted in the other one, so the other one I'm much happier about. You'll see about that one next, but I think that in general, this is a really strong roster, and it's one that I feel pretty good about how much I spent on the buy-in and all that. I think I'm in line for a good setup going into the season. So, yeah, hopefully you guys enjoy this team. Again, if you have any questions, let me know, and we'll move on to the next one here. So moving on to this team here, this one will be the one that had a slightly lower buy-in here. It was a $1,000 buy-in. Again, obviously not exactly a low buy-in, but it's certainly on the higher end of things here. Really happy with how this roster turned out. Again, this was another auction draft, and I was really able to prioritize just taking value where it was given to me while still getting some guys that I'm super stoked on this season. Again, you'll notice that I drafted Josh Allen to start things off with my quarterback position. I generally advise that, especially in smaller leagues, those 10, maybe even an 8-team league if you happen to be in it. In those leagues, I think it makes way too much sense to really heavily prioritize the quarterback position and tight end position. In general, most teams that you're drafting in these league formats are going to be really good on paper. You're going to feel like you've got really solid running backs, really solid receivers, and the positional advantage of a really high-end quarterback or a tight end matters quite a bit more in these smaller leagues because you're not going to have as much of a problem getting high-end running backs and wide receivers just because there's less teams competing for them. So I do generally make an effort to prioritize the quarterback and tight end positions in smaller leagues. That's what I did here, getting Josh Allen, along with obviously Trey McBride, who I have in both of these teams. At running back, I prioritized really just taking a lot of values here. There were a couple guys that came to me really cheap. I managed to get Isaiah Pacheco for far cheaper than I anticipated. He hasn't exactly been a target of mine, but I was really satisfied to get him. I think he's in line for a big role again this season, and even with the addition of Samaje Perine, I still think we're looking at a guy who should command the majority of first and second down and goal line work, and I don't think they're necessarily just going to automatically take Pacheco off the field for third downs and passing downs like that. So I think Pacheco's in line for a monster year. I think he could be a low-end running back one for me. James Cook, I managed to snag him as well. Really prioritized him because I view him as effectively a stack with Josh Allen. I think he's got a shot to potentially lead the Bills in targets this season. He's going to be that involved as a pass catcher. They don't necessarily have a true number one wide receiver on this team, at least yet. We haven't seen anybody step up there. And I think James Cook and Josh Allen are in line to be a really dynamic duo for me, so I'm really super stoked about that. And I got James Cook at a pretty solid value as well, so I was really happy to have that happen to me. At receiver here, a bunch of values really came to me. Evans, again, another guy I got for way cheaper than I was anticipating. I'm really stoked about Mike Evans' start to the schedule season. He gets games against Washington, Detroit, Philadelphia. His opening month is by far the best schedule to start the season. And I think he's in line to potentially put up a top 5 first month of the season. And if I have to at that point, I think I'd be really able to sell high on him and trade him even if I didn't want to keep him over the course of the full season. And that is something I'll keep in mind. I think that in general, he is a bit of an older receiver. We could see a regression in the second half. So just keep that in the back of your mind for all of you guys as well with Mike Evans. I think he's in line for an absolutely monster start to the year. But if you want to trade him over the course of the year, I think right around that week 4 to 5 standpoint could be a really good opportunity to do that. At receiver, I also got Michael Pittman, a guy that I really haven't been targeting, but I got him for about half price. Sort of just taking my own advice, saying that you should always be willing to bid on players, and I got him for a surprisingly cheap amount. I think he is in line for a lot of volume and what should be a really high octane, up-tempo offense. I am a little bit concerned about touchdown upside. I do think Adonai Mitchell and Josh Downs will be involved as well, so I don't think Pittman's going to be a wide receiver 1 by any means, but in a format where you get points per reception, in this case, half point per reception, I think he's going to be a really solid stabilizing force for the roster here. And then, of course, at tight end, I've got Trey McBride. You guys all know how excited I am about him this season. In my flex spots, I've got Rachaad White and Calvin Ridley here. Rachaad White's a guy that I think is, again, in line for a huge workload. He's got that similar, really solid first month to the season that Mike Evans does. I'll note I do have 2 Buccaneers here. It's not something I'm necessarily trying to do. I think I will make an effort to trade one of them after that first month of the season. I'll really ride that hot start and then try and move on and diversify just a little bit. And I've got Calvin Ridley, who I think could absolutely be a monster this season. I'm pretty optimistic about what the Titans are going to do on offense this year. I think they are potentially going to be the surprise team in the AFC, and I think that there's a lot to be excited about for Calvin Ridley. And even if he doesn't break right on my bench, I've got a couple really solid receivers as well. I've got T. Higgins, who I think is in line for another potentially really solid season, should bounce back from last year. The Ja'Marr Chase contract holdout opens up a really high ceiling for T. Higgins if we did see an extended period of time where Ja'Marr Chase didn't play. So that is certainly something to be optimistic about. Beyond him on my bench receiver, I've got Khalil Shakir, just giving myself another little bit of added exposure to the Bills offense, raising my ceiling a little bit. I do think Khalil Shakir could be a surprisingly highly valuable player in fantasy this season. I think he's got a shot to potentially be the number 1 target in the offense. I know I said the same thing about Cook, but there's so many unknowns there that Shakir, I think, is at least worth the dart throw, especially if you have Josh Allen. I've also got Jaden Reed, who should be a really solid PPR option for me. I could play him whenever I need to. And then Jalen Polk was just a dart throw. We'll see what happens early on in the season, but I do believe he's got enough upside to potentially be a difference maker. And then at running back, I've got a couple solid options as well. David Montgomery is a guy who I really do think is going to be a touchdown machine. If something were to happen to Jahmyr Gibbs, Montgomery would immediately be a top 5 running back, honestly. And having that kind of upside along with a guy that I can play whenever I need to, that gets me super excited as well. So I really do like him on the roster. And I got Blake Corum as well, just a pure upside pick. We'll see what happens. I know there are a lot of rumors speculating about maybe Kyren Williams is not necessarily as much of a lead back as we anticipated. I know they're going to have him returning punts. Blake Corum, he was really good in college. They spent a decent draft capital on him. We could see Blake Corum get involved in even if he doesn't, if something happens to Kyrie and Corum, would immediately be a workhorse running back and a really good offense. So in general, I really like this team. I don't think there are really any holes. I get that my wide receiver position is maybe a little bit weak because my best guy is Mike Evans, but behind him, I've got a bunch of guys that I think have really high ceilings, lots of guys that I'm optimistic about. I'm pretty confident I'll be able to fill in the holes there and be really happy with this roster. So I'm really stoked about this team. Let me know how you guys think I did on both of these teams. I think this is going to be a fun thing for me to do. I'll try and keep you guys updated throughout the course of the season as well if you guys are interested. Just wanted to give you guys some exposure, a peek behind the curtain, show you guys what I'm doing in my actual drafts, so you guys can see how I handle things when I actually have to put my money where my mouth is and all that. So yeah, I really like this team. I think I'd probably give this one like an A-. The other one probably gets like a B+. But of course, obviously, it's not just the draft. We've got to make sure we keep our teams good and updated and be as active as possible throughout the entire course of the season so that we can peak in those playoffs and get some championships. But it's really fun making these teams. Hopefully you guys enjoyed this peek behind the curtain. And beyond that, there's going to keep being 4+ videos the rest of the off season, or rest of the regular season. I can't believe that. It's the regular season already. We got football in 2 days. Going to be absolutely fantastic, and I just can't wait. So really appreciate you guys. If you want to make sure you don't miss any of the future content, just make sure you subscribe to the channel. That way I can help you win some championships this season, and hopefully we can have a fun ride together. So yeah, appreciate you guys, and I'll catch you with the next one. Peace. Thank you guys for watching. If you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video, check out these other videos here if you haven't. If you want more content, please feel free to follow me on Twitter at RealSteelFFB. I'll be more active on there as the season goes on. Thanks. Catch you later.